Grace Winters looked out at the stars from her station on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant. Her fingers moved quickly across the tactical display. At 24 years old, she was the youngest officer in the Earth Defense Fleet. This fact followed her everywhere like a shadow. "Lieutenant Winters, status report," Captain Richard Holloway said. His voice was deep and commanded respect. "All systems normal, sir. We're maintaining patrol pattern Delta through this sector," Grace replied. She stood straight, her dark hair pulled back tight in a regulation bun. The other officers on the bridge were all at least 10 years older than her. Lieutenant Commander Alan Reeves at Operations barely tried to hide his frown whenever she spoke. Grace knew what he thought, that she had gotten her position through luck, not skill. The Defiant was on a standard patrol mission along the outer colonies. These missions were usually quiet, but Grace preferred staying busy. She ran another scan of the surrounding space, something she did every 15 minutes instead of the required 30. "Sir," she said suddenly, her eyes narrowing at her display, "I'm detecting unusual energy readings at coordinates 227 Mark 43. Captain Holloway turned. "What kind of readings, Lieutenant?" "It appears to be some sort of spatial anomaly. But there's something strange about the pattern." Grace's fingers flew across her console as she analyzed the data. "The energy signature doesn't match anything in our database." Commander Reeves leaned over to look at his own readings. "Just looks like standard background radiation to me. Nothing to be concerned about." Grace shook her head. "With respect, sir, there's a pattern here. It's subtle, but definitely not natural." Captain Holloway studied both officers. After a moment, he said, "Let's take a closer look. Helm, adjust course to investigate. Keep us at a safe distance." As the Defiant approached the coordinates, the anomaly grew on their sensors. What had seemed small was actually massive, a swirling distortion in space that pulsed with strange energy. "Full stop," ordered the captain. "Lieutenant Winters, continue your analysis." Grace worked quickly, running the readings through various filters. Something about the energy pattern seemed almost deliberate, like a signal. She felt a chill run down her spine. "Sir, I believe this anomaly is artificial. The energy pulses follow a mathematical sequence." She looked up at the view screen. "And it's expanding at an increasing rate." "Expanding?" Captain Holloway frowned. "Toward us?" Before Grace could answer, the anomaly flared brightly. The ship shuddered as energy waves hit them. "Shields holding at 82%, called out Commander Reeves. "Another wave coming." "Wait," Grace said, spotting something in the data. "The waves aren't random. They're following a pattern. If we adjust our shield harmonics to frequency 47.3, we can ride out the pulses instead of fighting them." Captain Holloway hesitated only for a second. "Do it." Grace made the adjustments herself. The next wave hit, but this time the ship barely shook. The energy seemed to flow around them instead of against them. "It worked," Captain Holloway said, sounding impressed. "Good thinking, Lieutenant." The anomaly pulsed several more times before collapsing on itself and disappearing completely. The bridge was quiet for a moment. "Sir," said the communications officer, "we're receiving an emergency transmission from Earth Command. They're detecting multiple unknown vessels approaching human space. They've somehow bypassed our early warning systems." Captain Holloway's face grew serious. "Put it on screen." The view screen changed to show Admiral Patricia Lawrence. Her expression was grim. "This is not a drill. We have first contact with an unknown alien fleet. All ships are to return to Earth defense positions immediately. These vessels have not responded to hails and are approaching at high speed." Grace felt her heart beat faster. First contact, and it didn't sound friendly. "Helm, set course for Earth, maximum warp," ordered Captain Holloway. He glanced at Grace. "Lieutenant Winters, I want you to review everything we know about these vessels by the time we arrive." "Yes, sir," Grace said. She had trained all her life for this moment, though she never expected it would come so soon. As the youngest officer in the fleet, she had something to prove. And now, with humanity possibly facing its greatest threat, she would need every bit of her training and talent. The Defiant jumped to warp, racing toward home and an uncertain future. The Defiant arrived at Earth alongside dozens of other ships from the fleet. Grace stood at her tactical station, studying the alien vessels on her display. There were 23 of them, arranged in a perfect formation that seemed too orderly to be natural. "They're calling themselves the Vex-Terry Collective," Captain Holloway informed the bridge crew. "Earth Command has established basic communication and diplomatic talks are about to begin." Grace frowned as she analyzed their formation. "Sir, I'm noticing something unusual about their positioning. They've placed their ships to cover all approach vectors to Earth." Commander Reeves sighed. "It's just a standard defensive formation, Lieutenant. We do the same thing." "No," Grace insisted, pointing to her screen. "Look at how their smaller vessels are positioned. They're not in defensive positions. They're in strike formation. And they've been slowly adjusting their positions for the past hour." Captain Holloway moved closer to look at her display. "Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. These movements don't match peaceful intentions." The captain studied the screen for a long moment. "Send your analysis to Earth Command. I'll contact Admiral Lawrence directly." But it was already too late. The view screen suddenly lit up with weapons fire as the alien vessels launched their attack. Earth's orbital defense platforms were the first targets, destroyed before they could fully power up. "Red alert!" shouted Captain Holloway. "All hands to battle stations." The bridge erupted into activity. Grace's fingers flew over her console, bringing weapons systems online. 3 Vex-Terry ships on intercept course, she reported. "They're targeting our engines." "Evasive maneuvers," ordered the captain. "Return fire. Target their weapons systems." The Defiant shuddered as it turned sharply, firing phasers at the approaching aliens. One shot connected, but the other aliens adjusted quickly. "They're learning our patterns," Grace warned. "We need to be unpredictable." Around them, the battle for Earth had begun. Human ships fought bravely, but the surprise attack had given the Vex-Terry a critical advantage. Grace watched helplessly as the U.S. Valiant exploded nearby. "Sir, 2 more ships approaching from behind," she called out. The ship rocked violently as enemy fire struck them directly. Grace was thrown from her station, hitting the deck hard. She pulled herself up quickly, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. A massive explosion tore through the bridge. Sparks and debris flew everywhere as systems overloaded. Grace covered her face, feeling the heat wash over her. When she looked up, she saw Captain Holloway lying on the floor, a piece of metal embedded in his chest. "Medical team to the bridge," she shouted into her communicator. She rushed to the captain's side, checking his pulse. It was weak, but there. Commander Reeves lay nearby, unconscious but breathing. Other bridge officers were in similar states, some moving, some frighteningly still. "Lieutenant Winters," Captain Holloway whispered, blood at the corner of his mouth. "Status report." Grace swallowed hard. "We've taken heavy damage, sir. Engines are offline. Weapons at 30% capacity." He coughed, wincing in pain. "You need to take command. You're the ranking officer still standing." "Sir, Commander Reeves is in no condition." The captain interrupted. "It's you, Lieutenant. That's an order." Dr. Olivia Hayden arrived with her medical team, rushing to the captain's side. "We need to get him to sickbay immediately," she said, her face grave as she looked at Grace. The ship shook again as another hit landed. Through the view screen, Grace could see Earth's defenses failing. The Vex-Terry ships moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. "Get the captain to sickbay," Grace ordered. She moved to the command chair, her heart pounding. "Engineering, I need damage reports. Communications, try to contact any remaining fleet vessels." She sat down, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. Around her, the surviving bridge crew looked at her with uncertainty. At 24, She was now the acting captain of the U.S. Defiant during humanity's darkest hour. And she had a plan. Grace gripped the arms of the captain's chair as the Defiant shook from another hit. The bridge was filled with smoke and the urgent voices of the remaining crew. "Status report," she ordered, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Shields at 27%, weapons at minimal power," replied the young ensign who had taken over tactical. "Life support is stable, but engines are badly damaged." Chief Engineer Samuel Cooper's voice came through the comm system. "Engineering to bridge. We might be able to get impulse engines online, but warp drive is completely fried." "Do what you can, Chief," Grace said. "How long until we have movement?" 20 minutes, maybe less if we bypass some safety protocols." Grace looked at the view screen. Earth's defenses were failing. The Vexteri ships moved with perfect coordination, methodically destroying human vessels one by one. They needed a new approach. "Dr. Hayden to bridge." The doctor's voice sounded tired and strained. "Captain Holloway is stabilized but critical. He's in no condition to return to duty." "Understood, Doctor," Grace replied. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking. During her studies at the academy, Grace had focused on alien communication patterns. She had always been fascinated by how different species shared information. Now that knowledge gave her an idea. Lieutenant Kelly scanned the Vexteri fleet. "Focus on their energy emissions and communication frequencies." The communications officer looked confused but followed orders. "What am I looking for?" "Patterns. Their ships move too perfectly together. They must be communicating constantly." After a minute, Lieutenant Kelly nodded. "Yes, I'm detecting continuous transmissions between all their vessels. It's like they're all connected somehow." Grace stood up and moved to the science station. "Let me see the energy readings from their damaged ships." She studied the data carefully. "That's it. We can use this." "Use what, Captain?" asked the officer at helm control. "Their damaged ships emit a different energy pattern. If we can adjust our own signature to match it, they might think we're one of their damaged vessels." Grace tapped at the console, already working on the modifications. "And their communication system seems to operate on an open channel. If we can tap into it, we might learn why they're attacking." The crew looked at her with uncertainty, but no one objected. They had no better options. "Engineering, I need you to modify our power signature to match these specifications," Grace said, sending the data to Cooper. "And divert all remaining power to sensors and communication systems." "That'll leave us with minimal shields," Cooper warned. "One good hit and we're done." "It's a risk we have to take," Grace replied. "We need information more than protection right now." While the engineers worked, Grace had the helm move them slowly toward a cluster of damaged Vexteri ships. They drifted like wounded animals on the edge of the battlefield. "Power signature adjusted," Cooper reported. "We look like a damaged alien ship now, at least on their scanners." Lieutenant Kelly, tap into their communication frequency. "Let's see what they're saying." The bridge speakers crackled with strange sounds, clicks and high-pitched tones that no human throat could make. But the ship's universal translator began to process the alien language. "Human vessels showing minimal resistance as expected," came the first translated words. "Their technology is primitive. Begin harvesting procedures once resistance is eliminated." "Harvesting," whispered someone on the bridge. More transmissions followed. Grace listened with growing horror as she understood the truth. The Vexteri didn't see humans as intelligent life. To them, Earth was simply a resource-rich planet to be stripped and used. Humans were no more than simple animals to be cleared away. "They don't think we're sentient," Grace said quietly. "They think we're just." Her words were cut off as an alarm sounded. A Vexteri patrol ship had spotted them and was approaching fast. "They've detected us," called out the tactical officer. "They're charging weapons." Grace gripped the console. "Evasive maneuvers. Chief Cooper, can we jump to impulse now?" "It's not ready," We need 5 more minutes. The Vexteri ship fired. The blast hit the Defiant directly, throwing everyone to the deck. Grace pulled herself up as emergency lights flashed. Damage report. Hull breach on deck 5. Sealing emergency bulkheads now. Grace knew they couldn't survive another hit. But among the transmissions, she had heard something useful. Something that might save them. Grace's mind raced through their options as the Vexteri ship prepared to fire again. In the intercepted transmissions, she had noticed something important. Lieutenant Kelly broadcast on their command frequency. Send this exact pattern. Grace quickly input a series of tones and pulses into the console. Kelly looked confused but did as ordered. The strange signal went out. The Vexteri ship suddenly powered down its weapons. It hovered, seemingly confused. "What did you just do?" asked the tactical officer. "I sent their emergency stand-down code," Grace explained. "I heard it in their communications when one of their ships was accidentally targeted by another." The moment of relief was short-lived. The alien ship began scanning them intensely. "They're trying to confirm our identity," Grace said. "Chief Cooper, how much longer for impulse engines?" 2 minutes. Grace made a decision. "Helm, take us into that debris field. Now." Full emergency thrusters. The Defiant lurched forward, pushing through the wreckage of destroyed ships. The Vexteri vessel followed but kept its distance from the floating debris. "Engines online." Cooper's voice came through just as they reached the thickest part of the field. "Full impulse. Get us out of here," Grace ordered. The ship shot forward, zigzagging through the debris. The pursuing Vexteri ship fired, but most shots hit floating wreckage instead. One blast grazed their rear shields, but they kept going. Finally, they broke free and jumped to full impulse, leaving the alien vessel behind. Grace let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Find us somewhere to hide and make repairs," she told the helm officer. "An asteroid field. Nebula. Anything." 3 hours later, the Defiant was hidden in a dense asteroid field. Grace sat in the captain's ready room, reviewing status reports. The damage was extensive, but they were alive. Dr. Hayden entered without knocking. Her face told Grace everything before she spoke. "Captain Holloway is gone," the doctor said quietly. "He regained consciousness briefly at the end. He recorded this for you." She placed a small device on the desk. Grace pressed play with shaking fingers. Captain Holloway's pale face appeared. "Lieutenant Winters," he said weakly, "I'm formally transferring command of the Defiant to you. It's not how either of us expected it, but you've earned it. Save our people, Captain Winters. I know you can." The recording ended. Grace sat in silence for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. "Thank you, Doctor," she said. "Please see to the wounded. I'll address the crew shortly." After Hayden left, Grace began sending out encrypted messages on emergency fleet channels. For hours, there was no response. Then, one by one, signals began to come in. The U.S. Intrepid, hiding in Saturn's rings. The U.S. Fearless, damaged but operational near Jupiter. 3 smaller vessels and a supply ship. All that remained of Earth's fleet. When she called the first video conference with the other ship's commanders, Grace saw their faces change when they saw her youth. "Who are you?" demanded Captain Frank Howard of the Intrepid. "Where is Captain Holloway?" "Captain Holloway is dead," Grace replied. "I'm acting Captain Grace Winters of the U.S. Defiant." "You can't be more than 25, said Commander Lydia Fisher of the Fearless. "We should consolidate under more experienced leadership." "With respect, Commander," Grace said firmly, "experience didn't help us against an enemy that fights like none we've ever seen. But I've analyzed their patterns and found weaknesses we can exploit." She shared what she had learned from the Vexteri communications and her analysis of their battle formations. They operate as a collective. Their ships coordinate through central command vessels. If we can disrupt those ships, we might throw their entire fleet into disarray. Captain Howard frowned. "That's a big if, kid." "It's Captain," Grace corrected him calmly. "And right now, this if is the only chance humanity has." The older officers exchanged looks, but no one argued further. Earth was under alien control. Most of the fleet was destroyed. They needed every idea they could get. "I'm establishing a hidden base here in this asteroid field," Grace continued. "We'll gather our resources and plan our counterattack." As the meeting ended, Grace looked at the star chart showing Earth surrounded by Vexteri ships. They were few against many, outgunned and outmatched. But they had something the aliens didn't expect: a young captain who understood how they thought. 2 weeks passed in the asteroid base, which the crew had named Haven. Grace barely slept, spending most of her time analyzing the Vexteri communications they had intercepted. With each passing day, the picture became clearer. "They rely on these 3 command ships," Grace explained, pointing to the holographic display. The remaining ship captains and senior officers gathered around the table in Haven's makeshift command center. "They direct all tactical operations. The other ships follow orders without question." "Like a hive mind," said Chief Engineer Cooper, who had become one of Grace's strongest supporters. "Not exactly," Grace replied. "More like a strict chain of command. They can think independently, but they won't act without orders from above." Captain Howard of the Intrepid leaned forward. "So if we take out these command ships, the rest might fall into confusion," Grace finished. "At least temporarily." "How do we get close enough?" asked Commander Fisher. "Our ships are outgunned, and they'll see us coming from light years away." Grace smiled slightly. "Not if they can't see us." She nodded to Cooper. "Show them." Cooper activated another display, showing schematics for the Defiant. "We've been working on enhancing our stealth systems." The Defiant was equipped with experimental technology that masks energy signatures. "We've modified it based on what we've learned about Vexteri sensors. One ship might get through," Grace continued. "We can't destroy their command vessels from the outside. They're too well protected. But a small team could board one and plant explosives at key points." The room fell silent as everyone realized what she was suggesting. "That's a suicide mission," Captain Howard said quietly. Grace met his eyes. "Not if we do it right. I'll lead the team myself." Arguments broke out immediately. Grace let them continue for a minute before raising her hand. "This isn't open for debate. As ranking officer, I've made my decision." Her voice was calm but firm. "The rest of our ships will create a diversion. The Fearless will attack their fuel depot near Jupiter. The Intrepid will target their communications array in Earth orbit. While they respond to these threats, the Defiant will approach their primary command ship." Planning continued through the night. The next morning, Grace selected her team. Lieutenant Nathan Miller from Security, 2 engineers, and communications specialist Diana Frost, who had been studying the Vexteri language. Before they departed, Dr. Hayden cornered Grace in the corridor. "You don't have to do this yourself," the doctor said. "Send someone else." Grace shook her head. "I would never order someone to do something I wouldn't do myself." "You're too important to lose," Hayden insisted. "No one is," Grace replied. "That's what the Vexteri believe, that some lives matter more than others. I don't." The plan was set in motion. The Fearless and Intrepid launched their attacks, drawing Vexteri ships away from Earth. The Defiant, running silent with its enhanced stealth systems, slipped through their perimeter. They approached the massive Vexteri command ship. Up close, it was like nothing Grace had ever seen, part mechanical, part biological, with sections that seemed to pulse like a living thing. Using the ship's transporter was too risky. Instead, Grace and her team used a modified shuttle with the same stealth technology. They approached a maintenance hatch that Cooper had identified from their scans. "Remember," Grace told her team as they prepared to board, "we placed the devices at the 3 locations we identified. Then get out. 15 minutes maximum." They entered the alien vessel, moving through corridors that felt more like arteries than hallways. The air was thick and humid, with strange smells none of them recognized. Using their modified scanners, they avoided Vexteri patrols. Grace led them to the first target, the ship's central communication hub. While the engineers placed the explosive device, actually a human AI designed to overwhelm the alien systems, Diana translated the symbols on the walls. "Captain," she whispered urgently. "These markings, they're talking about Earth. Something about processing begins tomorrow." Grace felt cold dread. They had even less time than they thought. The team moved quickly to the second location, the power distribution center. As they worked, an alarm suddenly blared. Harsh lights flashed, and alien voices echoed through the corridors. "They've detected us," Miller said, drawing his weapon. "We need to move. Now." The third location was the farthest away, the command center itself. As they ran through the corridors, Grace knew their chances of reaching it were slim. But they had to try. For Earth, for humanity, they had to try. Alarms blared throughout the Vexteri command ship. Grace and her team pressed against a wall as a group of aliens rushed past. She had never seen them up close before. They were tall and thin with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with faint patterns of light. Their eyes were large and completely black. "We can't reach the command center now," Miller whispered, checking his scanner. "Security is too heavy." Grace thought quickly. "The two devices we planted should be enough to disrupt their systems temporarily. We need to get back to the shuttle." They turned around, but found their path blocked by more Vexteri soldiers. Miller raised his weapon, but Grace put her hand on his arm. "Wait," she said. "If we start shooting, we'll never make it out." Instead, she nodded to Diana. "Can you change the light patterns on our suits to match their communication style?" Diana worked quickly, adjusting their equipment. "This is just a guess, Captain. I've only been studying their language for 2 weeks. It's our best chance," Grace replied. When the next patrol approached, Grace stepped forward alone. The lights on her suit pulsed in a pattern Diana had programmed. The Vexteri stopped, their heads tilting in confusion. Then one of them responded with similar light patterns from its skin. Diana whispered translations through their comms. "They're asking for identification, I think. Tell them we're maintenance workers responding to a system failure," Grace said quietly. Diana adjusted Grace's suit lights. The aliens conferred among themselves, then stepped aside, pointing down a corridor. "They're directing us to the maintenance sector," Diana said, surprised it had worked. The team moved quickly, following the aliens' directions at first, then diverting back toward their shuttle once out of sight. They were almost there when Grace's scanner beeped. "The devices have activated," she said. "We have 5 minutes before this place goes into chaos." They reached the shuttle just as the lights throughout the ship began to flicker. The alien vessel shuddered as the human AI invaded their systems, causing cascading failures. Grace piloted the shuttle away, keeping close to the command ship's hull to avoid detection. Behind them, the massive vessel began drifting, its engines shutting down. "It worked," Miller said as they watched from a safe distance. "Their systems are failing." Similar reports came in from the other ships. The 2 other command vessels were also experiencing disruptions. Across the system, Vexteri ships seemed confused, some drifting off position, others firing at nothing. But the victory came at a cost. The Furless had been badly damaged in its attack on the fuel depot, and of Grace's 5-person team, only 3 made it back to the shuttle. The 2 engineers had been caught by a patrol and couldn't be rescued. Back aboard the Defiant, Grace sat alone in her quarters, mourning their losses. Dr. Hayden found her there, treating the burn on her arm, where a Vexteri weapon had grazed her. "The engineers knew the risks," Hayden said gently. "They volunteered." "That doesn't make it easier," Grace replied. "No, it doesn't, but they helped save countless lives." Hayden finished bandaging the wound. "You should rest. You've been awake for nearly 40 hours." But Grace couldn't rest. Instead, she went to the lab where Diana was studying the data they'd gathered from the Vexteri ship. "I think I understand why they don't see us as intelligent," Diana said as Grace entered. "Look at this." She showed Grace recordings of the Vexteri communication. "They don't just use sound like we do. Their skin patterns are part of their language. They communicate on multiple levels simultaneously." Grace studied the patterns. "So to them, our communication seems too simple to be intelligent." "Exactly. It would be like if we met a species that only communicated in yes or no, with nothing in between." This gave Grace an idea. She began studying the alien language intensely, working with Diana to understand the skin patterns and what they meant. "If we could communicate on their level," Grace said, "maybe we could convince them we're intelligent beings, not just animals to be cleared away." She worked with the ship's engineers, developing a device that could translate human speech into Vexteri light patterns. It would be their bridge between two completely different forms of intelligence. "We've hurt them," Grace told her officers. "Now we need to talk to them. Before this turns into a war neither side can win." 3 days after their attack on the command ships, the Vexteri fleet had begun to reorganize. New command vessels had taken over, and they were gathering their forces for what looked like a major assault on the remaining human ships. "They found our position," reported Lieutenant Kelly. "Long-range sensors show 5 ships heading toward the asteroid field." Grace studied the tactical display in Haven's command center. The older captains waited for her decision. "We don't have time for another hit-and-run attack," she said. "We need to try communication before they wipe us out." Captain Howard shook his head. "They show no interest in talking. They'll destroy us on sight." "Not if I go alone," Grace replied. In one of their shuttles. The room erupted in protests. Grace raised her hand for silence. "We captured an intact Vexteri shuttle during the attack. I'll use it to approach their flagship. Diana and I have finished the translation device. I can speak to them in their own language, light patterns and all." "It's too dangerous," said Cooper. "Let someone else go." Grace shook her head. "I understand their language best. It has to be me." Despite fierce objections, Grace's plan went forward. Diana helped her practice the complex light patterns of the Vexteri language. The translation device was tested and adjusted. When it was ready, Grace boarded the alien shuttle alone. "If I'm not back in 12 hours, she told her officers, implement Plan B and save as many people as you can. The journey to the Vexteri flagship was tense. Grace piloted the shuttle carefully, transmitting surrender signals in the aliens' own communication style. To her surprise, they allowed her to approach and dock with the massive ship. 4 Vexteri guards met her at the airlock. They were clearly surprised to see a human emerge from one of their shuttles. Their skin flickered with rapid patterns of light. Grace activated her translation device. A suit she wore lit up with corresponding patterns, and her words were converted into their tonal language. "I am Captain Grace Winters of Earth," she said. "I wish to speak with your leader." The guards stared at her, their black eyes unreadable. Then one stepped forward, its skin pulsing with light. "You will be brought to the Supreme Commander," Diana's voice translated through Grace's earpiece. "Your attempt at our speech is unexpected." They led her through the vast ship, other Vexteri stopping to stare at the strange human who could speak in light. Finally, they reached a large chamber where a Vexteri larger than the others sat on a raised platform. Its skin glowed with complex, shifting patterns. "What is this creature?" The Supreme Commander's patterns translated in Grace's ear. "I am Captain Grace Winters of the United Earth Fleet," she replied, her suit lighting up with the corresponding patterns. "I have come to negotiate peace between our species." The Supreme Commander's skin flashed rapidly. "It mimics communication. Fascinating. Like a trained animal." Grace felt anger rise but kept her voice steady. "We are not animals. We are an intelligent species with our own civilization. We have art, science, philosophy. We wish to live." "Yet you communicate so simply," the commander replied. one-dimensional speech. No depth, no complexity. Grace activated a display on her suit, showing human achievements, equations, music, paintings, literature. We communicate in many ways. Our languages are different, but our minds are not. A younger Vexteri suddenly moved forward, its skin flashing aggressively. This is a trick. The humans damaged our ships. They killed our kin. It lunged at Grace, a weapon appearing in its hand. Grace moved instinctively, dodging the attack and disarming the alien with a combat move she had learned at the academy. She held the weapon but didn't use it. Instead, she stepped back and put it down. "I could have attacked," she said, her suit translating. "I chose not to. We want peace, not war." The Supreme Commander's skin patterns shifted slowly as it studied her. For the first time, the alien seemed truly interested. "You are not what we expected," it said finally. Grace stood tall, her suit glowing with the patterns that her translation device constructed. "Neither are you. Perhaps we should learn more about each other before we decide who deserves to live." For 3 days, Grace remained on the Vexteri flagship. The Supreme Commander agreed to halt the planned attack while they talked. In those 3 days, Grace learned more about the aliens than anyone had thought possible. "Your species thinks as individuals," the Supreme Commander said during their 3rd session. Its skin rippled with blue and green patterns that Grace was beginning to understand without translation. "Ours thinks as a collective, yet with separate bodies. It is difficult for us to understand your way." "Different doesn't mean less intelligent," Grace replied. Her translation suit had improved each day as Diana remotely adjusted it based on new data. "We cooperate despite being individuals. We build societies, create art, explore space, all without a collective mind." The commander's skin pulsed thoughtfully. "Show me how your people make decisions without the harmony of shared thought." Grace explained human democracy, debate, even argument. She showed recordings of Earth's great speeches, music, and scientific achievements. The Vexteri seemed fascinated by the idea that disagreement could lead to better solutions. "Your chaotic thinking produces innovation we do not have," the commander admitted. "Perhaps this is why your weapons worked against our ships when they should not have." "We don't want to fight you," Grace said. "We want to live and learn from each other. Earth has room for both our species." After hours of discussion, the Supreme Commander made a decision. Its skin glowed with formal patterns that Grace recognized as their ceremonial language. "We will withdraw our harvest ships," it declared. "In exchange, humans will share space near your planet for a small Vexteri research outpost. We will learn from each other before deciding if further contact is beneficial." Grace felt relief wash over her. "That is acceptable. We will establish communication protocols and cultural exchange programs." When she returned to her shuttle, the commander escorted her personally. Other Vexteri watched with their large black eyes, skin patterns showing curiosity and confusion. "Your species surprises us, Grace Winters," the commander said, using her name for the first time. Its skin glowed with a pattern she hadn't seen before. "You may visit our outpost when it is established. You understand our ways better than any human will." "I would be honored," Grace replied. As her shuttle departed, she noticed the Vexteri ships were already beginning to move away from Earth. Victory through words, not weapons. Captain Holloway would have been proud. When Grace returned to Haven, she found her officers had been preparing for the worst. They greeted her with amazement and relief. "How did you do it?" Captain Howard asked as they gathered in the command center. "I showed them we think differently, not less," Grace explained. "They communicate as a partial collective consciousness. To them, our individual minds seemed primitive at first, but once they understood our way of thinking has strengths their collective doesn't, they reconsidered." The next day, Grace addressed the assembled crews of the surviving fleet. As she stood before them, many twice her age, all having witnessed her unlikely journey from youngest officer to negotiator for humanity's survival, she felt both humble and proud. "The Vexteri have sent a formal message to Earth," she told them. "In it, they refer to me by the title Captain. In their culture, this is the highest honor they give to independent entities they consider equals. Not just to me, but to what I represent, humanity's unique way of thinking." She looked around at the faces watching her. "They've agreed to withdraw and establish peaceful contact instead. We've earned their respect, not because we're like them, but because we're different in ways they now value." Chief Engineer Cooper was the first to start clapping. Soon, the entire room joined in. Later, as Grace looked out at the stars from the viewport in her quarters, Diana came to give her a message. "Admiral Lawrence survived on Earth. She's asking for you specifically to oversee the new Vexteri Relations Program." Diana smiled. Not bad for the youngest officer in the fleet. Grace thought about how far she had come. From being dismissed because of her youth to saving humanity through understanding. The universe was vast and full of different minds, some collective, some individual, all valuable. She was still the youngest captain in the fleet, but now, age didn't seem to matter at all.